Is BTC passing off as Bitcoin? Lessons from the block size debate. Today's going to be the X Town Hall space, community driven. When I say community driven, I say, everybody, it's going to be an open forum. I'm going to really just kind of like just set the tone and groundwork and make sure it's not complete chaos, yelling and screaming. But ultimately, we've got a big court case going on where there's a claim where a lot of people appear to be joining. There's a passing off case where BTC is accused of passing off as the name Bitcoin and representing that it's Bitcoin. And everybody on the, consumers and everyday people are buying what they believe to be Bitcoin. And you got people like Jack Mallers and people like Michael Saylor, and they're all saying, and buy Bitcoin, and so, but the claim in the case is that particular version is not actually Bitcoin. It has nothing to do with Bitcoin. It's a completely separate forked protocol, and that's the claim. So, we're going to go on and hammer today, man, and get into it. And so, not only the legal stuff, but also lessons from the block size debate. I got Kurt Walker Jr., Alex Fauvel, 369 BSV. I got speakers panel. We invited one of the guys from BTC Core, which is Larry, on there. Dr. Wright, of course, is invited. Welcome to come in. I doubt he'll be there, but he's always invited. And it's unexpected, man. Really don't even know. Sometimes some great people. We invited Siggy from the Manifestable, Brett, also Siggy from the Terranode, potentially. So, all right, stay tuned. It's going to be an exciting knockdown showdown today. So we'll get started here in a moment. I'll see you on the inside and at the top. This is Gavin. Please, I would appreciate it. Thank you. All right. So yeah, let me just go through a couple of things I wanted to bring up. One was so this space is going to be the is BTC passing off as Bitcoin, lessons learned from the block size debate. And some of the points, that it's relevant because we got this passing off witness statement floating around here, which is this passing off case. It's in the UK right now. And one of the important highlights here is a simple witness statement for an everyday holder. So if you're just an everyday person holding $50 worth of Bitcoin back in the day, this is maybe important. This is relevant to you. And here's an example quoting from the witness statement. It says this. It says, follow as an example. Do not copy and paste. It's just an example text if you get so you can get an idea. Quote, when I invested in Bitcoin, part of the appeal was its promise as a system for low value everyday transactions. Like many small holders, I believe that Bitcoin could be used as a form of digital cash, enabling me to store and transact small amounts without incurring significant costs. At the time of my investment, Bitcoin was promoted as a scalable low-fee network, making it ideal for small transactions such as sending small payments or making micro purchases. However, due to changes in the protocol introduced by BTC Core, this is no longer possible. The transaction fees on the BTC network have increased dramatically, often exceeding the value of small amounts I hold. As a result, the cost of moving or spending my Bitcoin has become prohibitively expensive, effectively locking me out of using and transferring my funds. For example, if I hold a small amount of Bitcoin worth $50, attempting to make a transaction could incur fees of $10 or more, meaning that I would lose a significant percentage or even all of the value in the fees alone. This reality contradicts the original promise of Bitcoin, where small transactions were meant to be affordable and accessible to everyone, regardless of the amount they held. For small holders like myself, BTC Core have rendered Bitcoin unusable for its original purpose as digital cash. Instead of being able to transact freely and move small amounts without excessive costs, I'm now unable to use or transfer my Bitcoin without suffering financial loss. This has caused me and other small holders to lose money, and the cost of transacting often exceeds the value of Bitcoin we own. BTC Core's challenges have therefore not only devalued my investment, but have also made it impossible for small holders to participate in the Bitcoin network as originally intended. The shift towards high transaction costs undermines Bitcoin's utility as it's made for a system that only benefits large holders, while small holders are effectively left behind. And another relevant post here from BitCrash, he said yesterday fun fact, current BTC transaction fees are $3.84 as of November 14th at 1:18 a.m. about 40 sats. So rendering about 10 million BTC addresses useless as the transaction fees are higher than the balance of the wallet address. So as of yesterday, 18% of the BTC wallet addresses can't even get their Bitcoin or BTC out of their wallets. They're stuck there without paying. There's no way to get it out because the transaction fees are more than the balance in the wallet address. That's 18%. And that's just today, but tomorrow it could be a $10 transaction fee, or it could be $100 transaction fee. It changes. Now another relevant website is called BitScreener, thanks to Sirtoshi, which I heard about this yesterday. And it says top crypto with the most holders. I think this is important because it says Ethereum has over 115 million holders of its coin. Bitcoin SV is the second most at 58 million. BTC Core, 52 million. Algo, never even heard of them, 20 million. Bitcoin Cash, 14 million. So it's amazing that, see, Bitcoin Cash was the original protocol, and then it became Bitcoin SV. But I'm surprised because you'd think that if it was so bad and so just people were just carrying on from the original holders and they weren't even caring about it, then they would all have Bitcoin Cash. But only 14 million of Bitcoin Cash, 58 million of Bitcoin SV, and of the 52 million holders of the BTC Core, 18% of that. So it's a total of 18%. So I don't know, that's a lot of people. And a lot of those wallet addresses are just not even usable. So you've got a smaller amount of people holding this stuff than ever. And yeah, I think that's why this case is important. And we got a speakers panels today to break it all down. So, okay, what's up? Kurt, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, Gavin, can you hear me okay?
So, what do you think, Casey? How's he sound?
Sound great, Kurt.
Good.
Casey, Nicole.
All right, great.
Oh yeah. Well, we got a great day. Sirtoshi.
Yeah, mate. How's it going?
Good morning. How you doing?
I'm all right, mate. Glad to hear everybody. Good to hear from everybody. Awesome.
Yeah. Actually, credit to you on this website, BitScreener. I found that out yesterday from your show that they've got the number 2. Well, they got Ethereum, and then Bitcoin SV is the second most wallets. And
yeah, I mean, I don't actually know how up to date that website is. The figures kind of don't really seem to be changing all that much. It was, again, I found out about that website a while ago. But yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean, they're still ranking BSV in second position. I was just like, all right, cool,
Nice. Yeah, so we got this passing off case, and I just we got Kurt with us today as well, and I seem to remember that Kurt might remember something about the block size debate. I kind of remember a piece of history that he was involved in back then, but
that's why I'm here.
What a different time it was. I mean, it was such a different time. I mean, but there was a thread that came out from Mowert, and then Siggy was commenting, Craig was commenting, you were commenting, and then Brett Banafe, who hopefully will join us, he was commenting, and then Brett asked me to host this space, so I thought, you know what, let's get it going, and I invited the guy from BTC Core, Larry. Hopefully he shows up to give his feedback on things. So, really, I just want to open up as like a town hall open forum. So, but I guess for people who don't know, Kurt, I mean, do you want to just take us back in history a little bit as to what happened with this block size debate a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really big piece of history. It's like, how do you, why did World War II happen? It's like, well, where do we start, right? So
start with the gold, mate.
Yeah, I mean, it's like there is always a place to start, but it's, how much time do we want to be here? Ultimately, the block size war, you can break it down to its simplest terms. It's a difference in values between what Bitcoin is for. So there's one side of the equation that says Bitcoin is savings technology. It is a digital gold. It is designed fundamentally to be a store of value, and therefore it sits in wallets and it appreciates in value forever because it's perfect money. Blah blah blah. The other side of the conversation, and this is the side that I fall on, is that Bitcoin is very clearly a cash system. It is designed to facilitate global payments with 99.999% reduced friction. By friction, I mean both speed and cost. And then with that, it also is a programmable database connected to a global timestamp server. And so it can be used for anything as simple as a very simple payment, like, hey, I owe you $5. Here's $5 in Bitcoin. Or it can be as complex as, hey, we would like to do monetized computation of some other data that exists, and the computation of that data and the timestamp server, the global attestation of its validity, is a thing that will give it more value. And so the deep conflict between what those two networks or network ideas look like at scale led to like both sides saying, hey, well, you can't use my tool to do that. Now, I argue and have argued passionately that our side of the equation, the Bitcoin as a cash system, is the very obvious fundamental that Bitcoin was based on. It's very clearly built on. It's very clear in the white paper. It's very clear in the old writings of Satoshi. It's very clear also if you get into the code and see, what Bitcoin Scrypt is and does and all these other things. Now, they argue, however, on the other side, that Bitcoin is BTC because, well, you get the Hegelian dialectic. If everybody agrees to this thing and the pushback is less powerful than the initial presumption, then whatever people believe is true becomes true, and therefore BTC is Bitcoin, no matter how we pare it down or make it grow in ways that aren't Bitcoiny. So it is a difference in opinion over, can a group of people continuously decide to change reality forever, versus are truths fundamental and can they be understood based on their fundamentals? And so that's the deep worldview difference. Now, I also argue that the block size war was not an intellectually honest war between two groups of people who were being fair with each other. In reality, I think there is a deep amount of subterfuge because Bitcoin is truly disruptive to the most powerful people in the world, and that is in big banking, big payments, big tech, big government, etc., big data, so which encompasses like tens of trillions of dollars of global value. And when you threaten those people with a tool that will likely bankrupt their companies or at least make them quite a bit less wealthy than they were, then you're obviously going to have quite a bit of pushback. And I think that pushback was done much earlier than people are aware. And the product of that is that ultimately you had people taking venture capital money through a bunch of shell companies in order to push a narrative that looks very much like what people think of as Bitcoin or the blockchain space today, versus the people who are originalists and wanted to see the vision of Bitcoin as established in sort of its early culture, the white paper, the early Satoshi writings, and such. So the block size war is a lot of things. And it's different things to different people. And it's very hard to have an intellectually honest conversation with it because there's a lot of money tied up on both sides. There's a lot of emotions tied up on both sides. So it's not just one thing for anybody. And so I try to be fair about it. But it's it's like saying what's the right borders for Poland, Russia, and Ukraine? Go. And like there's a lot to unpack to get to any of that. So that's my brief summary.
All right, thank you, Kurt.
Can I add to the history on that?
History. Go ahead, Sirtoshi.
Yeah. So this is what it really comes down to. It comes down to provenance. So as I've said before, a digital commodity cannot have any limitations or restrictions, because otherwise the network can be manipulated and centrally controlled. And a commodity cannot be modified after it has been created, which is when it's been extracted. So the entire network has to be set, like Craig said, Bitcoin is set in stone. And then the commodity is extracted with all those elements already in it. The moment you have someone else modifying it, adding to it, then that's your central point of authority and control. Scaling is a different kettle of fish. You can scale it to your till the cows come home. You're literally like speed, cost, and scale, because you're not changing any of the fundamentals of it. So Bitcoin was never created with a scaling limit set in it. And this is the history that the BTC SegWit fraudsters are trying to hide from us. This is the history. So I've got it here. So it was actually here we go. On the 15th of July, 2010, Craig Wright, as Satoshi Nakamoto, installed a 1 megabyte block cap after being pressured by Hal Finney to do so, since Hal Finney was unfamiliar with the nature of Bitcoin's economic model. And it was Ray Dillinger who actually was a witness to this, and he said the limit was originally Hal Finney's idea. Both Satoshi and I objected that it wouldn't scale at 1 megabyte. And that is it. So when they're saying, oh, Satoshi set this thing, it's a feature, not a bug. What they're not telling you is that Bitcoin was never designed with a scaling limit. And I personally suspect that Hal Finney was a CIA operative, because, basically anybody who is a code breaker or works in cryptography, they all work for the 3-letter agencies, particularly in the United States. And they were just like, right, well, because we don't quite know what this thing is, but what we do know is that we don't want it because, it's not the US dollar. If we can find a way to restrict it, then that gives us, that gives us time to find out how to actually corrupt it. So Bitcoin was never made with a scaling limit. And this is why the legacy address didn't change when they implemented the 1 megabyte block size, because it was never hard coded in. It was never hard coded in. That's why they call it a soft cap. If they had hard coded the 1 megabyte block cap in, that would be a completely different change of code that would have required a brand new legacy address to be created. End of.
Well said. All right, let's go over to Brett Banafe. Welcome up, buddy. Good to see you. Good morning.
Hey, good morning. Thank you so much for having me up.
Yeah, just thought I'm glad to see you. We got Alex Fauvel on stage. We got Reknow. I know I've talked to you on X. If you guys want to hold the requests, I think we got a good speakers panel so far. We got additional people we'll bring up here as well. But let's kind of go through this, and then we'll add up more people as we go. So. All right. So, yeah, back to you, Kurt. Okay, Alex, got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say on the legacy addresses, because I've been doing a bit of a deep dive into how things changed for a project I'm working on. And actually, the address starting with a 1 is a bit of a Bitcoin standard protocol, but it's not actually anything to do with the way Bitcoin functions. You hash a public key, and then you append a number to it, a 1-byte number. And that is the 1 for Bitcoin addresses. For pay-to-script hash addresses, it's the number 3. Now, pay-to-script hash is not Bitcoin, not because it starts with a number 3. It's not Bitcoin because they duplicate the programming stack and then run it a second time. So that's the reason why the pay-to-script hash addresses are not Bitcoin, because they're using the signature field as a programming field. So they've kind of gone outside of the standard protocol to accomplish something that really you shouldn't be doing anyway, because it's not.
So the number 1 address is important.
Sorry, I was just getting a call.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So the number 1 address, as
I
Satoshi's talked
think
about, is like the
that
legacy
in the
address,
future,
right?
we will have addresses that start with a different number, but that's not what makes them Bitcoin. It's just a flag to show what script you put around that address when you're creating a payment for someone.
Okay.
The other
Nice.
thing is that pay-to-script hash was done almost immediately after Craig, as Satoshi left. and it was introduced by Gavin, and I would say that's when Bitcoin became something else. It actually goes
Pay to
back
Scrypt is
before.
when it became something else.
Yeah, the block size limit is a node setting. It is not protocol. Protocol is the order of operations and what the operations are, not the limitations of the operations. So you can kind of think of it as like a checklist for a pre-flight checklist. You can scale those checks up depending on your equipment. But if you add a brand new check in there, like, flushing, make sure the toilet flushes before you fly. Well, that's not something that the airport authority cares about. They care about whether the wings are going to fall off and stuff.
Okay, I want to hear what Kurt has to say about this whole wallet address thing, and if there's any truth to it. Kurt.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, there's certainly not any dishonesty associated with what he's saying. There's actually earlier Satoshi, the very original Bitcoin, the first. I didn't even know it wasn't very long at all, but they were simply raw public keys. So they didn't use cryptography in the addressing at all. So Bitcoin used just raw public keys. So you have your keys, but what we think of as a Bitcoin address today, whether it starts with a 1 or a 3 or whatever, is it's been run through a cryptographic algorithm to make it another thing, essentially, which is how you're defining the Scrypt, the locking and the unlocking of those Bitcoins, the locking to move them, and then ultimately how will they be unlocked in the future. It defines the mechanism by which that's done. And then pay to Scrypt hash, was might have been the first BIP after Satoshi was. I don't know if it's the very first one. The very first BIP was
it was BIP 16. It was the first actual change to the protocol that was implemented after Satoshi left. Everything else was like bug fixes and stuff.
Yep. Yeah, and if you look at like what was the first BIP ever? Well, it was the establishment of the BIP process, and then the second BIP was the reestablishment of the BIP process by another guy. I think the first one was Amir Taki, if I recall, but second one was Gavin and some other guys like saying, "Hey, yeah, we're gonna make this work," and Luke Jr. is going to be the BIP editor and all these things. So it was them like having their little inauguration upon Satoshi's exit, because they had wanted to move the project to GitHub for at least a year. They were getting very irritated with Satoshi that he simply assigned work to them rather than taking public pull requests. And they wanted to move it from SourceForge and have a committee and the whole thing. And then, well, they got their way when Satoshi went away. And then, yes, among the first things done was, hey, multi-sig is really, really complicated, and we really don't understand the Scrypt stack very well. So we're just going to create pay to Scrypt hash, which consolidates and simplifies a bunch of things, but also makes fee calculation really weird. My big criticism of pay to Scrypt hash is the way that fee calculation happens, but that's probably unnecessarily technical for this audience.
It's interesting you say that though, Kurt, because that's one of the key benefits they mention.
Yeah. They say that it simplifies fee calculation, but what I don't like about it is you don't actually know the fee until you have committed to the unlocking script. So it's a little bit like you're playing the lottery with unlocking the coins, and at a certain level it doesn't matter, like when it's sub-cent and whatever, it's the kind of thing like, I'm just going to write it off. But over time, especially in a world where they believe that fees should go up forever, it's also problematic. But I take a fundamentally problematic view of the fee calculation in pay to Scrypt hash. But again, that's pretty deep in the weeds for the audience.
Yeah. So right now, back to the, it looks like it's around according to the post from BitCrash yesterday, the fees on BTC were $3.84 yesterday. So that took out about 18% of the wallet addresses in total. So if you're one of those people that is just a small holder, does that mean that you can't even move your BTC?
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's the same thing. Imagine if your local bank said, "Hey, you know what? We just simply will not let you do business under, $20." Like, okay, well, now I can't use my debit card or credit card like anywhere unless I get over, so I have to buy stuff that I don't want to buy in order to make the transaction even make any sense. But that's not even just the establishment of a minimum would be its own problem. But the fact that the fees, well, there's two problems. High fees are problematic for free market economics for all kinds of reasons. And then secondarily, not being sure of the fees in the future is an even bigger problem. So imagine trying to plan your life, like Bitcoin's privacy, for example. Like, hey, I'm gonna spread my UTXOs out so that when I pay a friend at some point in the future, I'm not paying them from a single public key hash that has $50 million in it. Maybe I only want you to know that the $5 I owe you is money that I have. You don't need to know that I have any other money. But high fees force UTXO consolidation, which doxes my payments anytime I make payments. Now, this, of course, is because small blockers are averse to payments as a concept with Bitcoin, but ultimately, the white paper makes this very clear: privacy and UTXO spreading out, like not reusing keys, that kind of thing. And then secondarily, there's all kinds of reasons why you would know. For example, if you're even just a decent businessman, you probably have a few bank accounts just in case. Like, okay, Chase is giving me trouble, or Bank of America is giving me trouble, or whatever. Like, I'm all of my money is not in one basket, but BTC's fee economics incentivize you to put all of your coins into one basket, literally, which literally breaks the privacy mechanism of Bitcoin with those fees. Now, if they're sub-cent like they are on BSV and lots of other networks, frankly, you should spread out your UTXOs for the sake of privacy, because it's not anybody's damn business, and Bitcoin is a privacy technology when it is used the way Bitcoin was designed to be used. Problem is BTC people don't want to use Bitcoin the way it was designed. They want to reimagine it in their vision, which is a sliding scale and a moving target in perpetuity, in my experience.
Last week, Kurt, we had on a gentleman, really a lively debate. I mean, it was really an interesting show. He's with, was it Red Pill Media, Casey? No, not Red Pill Media, but what was the media group that he's with? Oh, man. Casey, what was the group? What was his name again?
You talking about G Money?
G Money, yeah, G Money. That's right. And he was a guy who supports BTC, and also he's part of. Anyways, this media company, and we had a great had him on, and it was awesome. And it was Sirtoshi was here questioning him, and about his worldviews and why he supported BTC. And I think in summary, it's the way I would describe it in coming in why he thinks that BTC is going to win is because BTC has the most amount of market value, and it is consensus that it's Bitcoin. And also it has, it's kind of the theory of the most amount of guns is what this is his argument, that he believes that it's the strongest military. It's the biggest thing around it. It's got the most firepower. Take it or leave it. You don't like it.
Follows hash. But price follows hash rate, so they're the same point, really. So
he thinks that hash secures the network. He has no idea what hash rate really is, or what it does, or the purpose of it.
Well, it's philosophical. I mean, and the funny thing is, he's right until he's wrong, and it's like network effect is important, but it is not perfect. Like as an American, I don't give a rat's ass what King Charles is up to. And, but 300 years ago, that would have been a very, very different conversation. And so, hey, can you break away from the greatest empire in the world that's been expanding for 1,000 years and all these things? Like, statistically, no, like you are going to fail. Like the British Empire is not going to let you go easily. But that's just, things change. And it's the same with any empire, any great big idea. I make a lot of Catholic Church analogies as well in regards to Bitcoin. It's like, there is the monolith, there's the big one, but ultimately free people, especially when they become smarter, better organized, more able to simply communicate, all of a sudden these big, powerful entities make a lot less sense over time. So BTC is the leader in all kinds of things right now, but it's a big meme, and the meme is largely false. And so because the economics of BTC are frankly out of balance and nobody wants to hear about it, at some point it's like the same thing with the national debt. The national debt just crossed I don't know, 36 or 38 trillion dollars here in the US. Oh, new record. And you get people who are like, that doesn't matter as long as you can service it. We're just going to grow out of it and blah, blah, blah. And like, you know what? They've been right for a long time. Like the dollar has not collapsed yet, but it doesn't mean that it won't happen. And so you need to have an insurance policy for your top 3 to 5 most likely outcomes in your life. And BTC falling apart, it seems crazy until it happens one day. And that's
let me
just
ask
it.
about that as well. I mean, we got this case which is now about the naming rights of Bitcoin, and it really is a champagne passing off case. It's saying that it's using the 1959 champagne case from the UK, where the winers all came together and they were growing champagne in the Champagne district. And then all of a sudden, another company called Spanish Champagne started selling champagne, and they called it Spanish Champagne, and everybody started buying it. And they made a lot of money, and they thought, wow, they thought they were buying the champagne from that same district. And it turned out it wasn't that; it was something else. And so they went to court, and the court said, "Well, wait a second, you can't market your product with their brand champagne on it and make all this money, and it's not that. That's passing off." And so they won the case, and it went back. So ultimately, that's what the case is based on. Craig isn't Sirtoshi, according to the court, as a matter of law. So it's just him and other miners and other investors, developers, and even small holders, even $3, $20, $50, like I mentioned, this passing off, can file witness statements and say, "Hey, I've been harmed, I've been damaged because of this naming. This thing is using the name of BTC." Now, I saw that Larry, in that thread that you were incurred, and I don't know if you were in it, Alex, Brett was in it as well. He said that, it doesn't matter. Change the name any day of the week. He was okay with changing the name to something, to SegWit coin, I think is what Siggy suggested. Call it SegWit coin, was one of the options. I mean, what seems to be the problem with doing that? Would that be legal for them to just change it to SegWit coin, and then they can go about their business?
The problem, so there's a lot of applicable law that people ignore in Bitcoin, and then there's a lot of unapplicable law that people apply to Bitcoin. There's a lot of weird stuff about Bitcoin that makes it a very different asset. But I've always liked the way Sirtoshi has explained it in that it's a damn commodity, and if it's a commodity, it can't change, and you can't change it. It doesn't matter if everybody wants it to change, and it's the same as gold, right? Like, gold is gold. You can mix something together and say that it's gold 2.0, or like, the difference between 14 and 18 karat gold is about its, what's mixed into it and that kind of thing. But ultimately, there is a atomic definition for gold, and you can dislike it. In fact, everybody can dislike it, but we can't change it. And Bitcoin, if Bitcoin is to be a sound money, and I believe that it is a sound money, then that fundamental thing cannot change. The problem with people is that they have a very unsophisticated view of things that are digital. They don't understand that you can have fundamental properties of a digital thing. And it's just very different, because you can hold gold in your hand. You can have a gold earring or a gold nugget, and you can understand it because you can interact with it the way that your lizard brain, like the deepest part of you, can understand that you're holding a physical thing and here's what it's made of and whatever. But when it comes to digital is so new, and we have only a couple of generations of experience with the concept of a digital asset, that people want it to be all these other things. Like, that's why there's this weird, like, worshipful aspect to Bitcoin for a lot of people, or it's all these things. If you go read like Soft War or Bitcoin Standard, they're anthropomorphizing it. And it's all these other, and it's just like, all of it is very nonsensical. Bitcoin, if you can just step out of the weird egoism and religiosity of it, it's a clearly defined and clearly definable and understandable thing. And if you can get that far to it, then it's very easy to say who is passing off and why. Now, the problem between like BTC and BSV is we don't even use the same words as each other. So like the word fork is an example where we disagree on what the fork not even is, but the definition of a fork as it applies to Bitcoin. So BSV currently, the node implementation of SV node, is a fork ultimately of the Bitcoin ABC repo. The software was forked from there, and Bitcoin ABC was ultimately a fork of Bitcoin Core. But that is a fork of software. Bitcoin isn't just software. So Bitcoin is expressed in software, but Bitcoin itself is an idea. It is a series of rules. And if those rules are, in fact, if they are followed, you don't actually need to implement Bitcoin in code. So I went through an exercise with a guy who was telling me, no, Bitcoin's definitely code. And I said, no. It's a game. It's a game theory with a bunch of rules. So you could take hash tables that are physically written. You could have communication channels that are analog. You could have databases. You could have people that are competing to communicate with each other and create the next block in a physically written paper ledger. Now, it's very, very, very deeply impractical to do that way, but it can be done that way because Bitcoin is not software. Bitcoin is a set of rules, just like the game of Monopoly or any other thing. Like, you can give people an instruction manual and you can put them to work on it, and you can implement Bitcoin without the code. Now, if those rules change, because Bitcoin is the rules of the Bitcoin system, well, then that's a very different thing. And that's where we get into, the champagne passing off or whatever. Like, sorry, if it's not from champagne, it's not champagne. And that's a very simple thing to understand. The problem is the things about Bitcoin, math, cryptography, game theory, like these are things that people don't understand deeply. The average person doesn't understand deeply. And so for them, it's like, hey, you break it down into, it's this thing that goes up in value and you should just buy some. And that's something that's pretty easy for people to understand. And so they go by the price. The price is the talisman or the totem that they use to understand all the ethereal aspects of Bitcoin that they don't understand. And then you lose the plot because it's not that. Like, those are all second and third order effects of the existence of Bitcoin, but they don't define Bitcoin itself. And frankly, I think that's really sad, but it's just like a lot of things. People don't understand macroeconomics. People don't understand quantum mechanics. People don't understand all kinds of really, really interesting and amazing things because they just don't have time to. And that's the real tragedy of the conversation.
Yeah, well, let me ask actually about this fork analogy that you brought up, and I know Sirtoshi's talked about it, and I would like to get some opinions on. I hear from, I think it was Coin Market Cap, that Bitcoin Cash forked off from BTC, and then BSV forked off from Bitcoin Cash and went somewhere else. You said you're now saying that the word fork, there's a disagreement as to what that even means. I mean,
well,
help me understand.
So there's a couple of things. So actually, in Bitcoin, you should clarify. Are we talking about forking the code, the GitHub repo? Like, I fork code all the time. I was working on an AI model yesterday. I forked half a dozen repos to tinker with some stuff. And but that's a very different thing than a database fork. So and a database fork can happen in Bitcoin in an emergent fashion. So if there's some kind of network segregation for whatever reason, or just simply a disagreement about the state of the ledger, you can create a split. So that now they are competing forks of Bitcoin. And this is an emergent phenomenon in Bitcoin. The last time this happened was in 2021 on BTC. There was a what do they call it? A stale block, and essentially for all intents and purposes, it was kind of a double spend. There was one version of the chain that had one transaction that was valid, that was not valid on the other transactions. Somebody seems to have coordinated a double spend in January of 2021. Now, that is a thing that happens on the network. You have competing fork in network. Now, the other thing that you can do is you can create a fork ID in the code that makes the database permanently split. So it doesn't matter how much hash power there is on one side or the other. After a certain point, they simply cannot reorg and resorb each other's data sets. Now, that's a different kind of fork. So I have now described 3 forks that can apply to Bitcoin. So when people say a Bitcoin fork, it's like, for the same reason, Litecoin is a Bitcoin fork, right? but not of the database. Litecoin is a fork of the code repo of Bitcoin Core. And again, this is a pretty simple thing once you understand what is being talked about, like why Bitcoin Cash can be a fork of Bitcoin and Litecoin can be a fork of Bitcoin, but they're technically forks of two different aspects of Bitcoin. And you can understand it once you get it, but most people, I'm already talking over the heads of most people that you would ever talk to about Bitcoin because they don't understand software development environments, they don't understand databases, they don't understand game theory, and so you've lost them. And that works in the favor of the network effect, which is BTC. And that's the fundamental problem that we have in explaining big block Bitcoin. Why would BSV be the real Bitcoin or any other thing? Like there's a pile of predicate information there.
Sorry, Kurt. I just
you want to jump in, Reknow?
Yeah, just on the education front and the kind of general conversation. I think this is kind of the purpose of Craig being an educator, being this kind of Trumpian person. It's sort of like it's this brilliant opportunity to educate the world on, like, has anyone checked out the MetaNet ICU channel, where Craig does long kind of lectures on, I would suggest anyone here go and listen to all of that. There's like 50 videos that are over an hour long each of Craig going into Plato, Socrates, Pandora, all these ancient philosophical sort of contexts, and just just laying it all bare as to human nature, the rule of law in terms of all of this. So when he puts out a legal case that he himself is representing himself, which he never loses when he represents himself, he only loses when he's being represented, he says, and it's right on the eve of the 100,000 parties, which he said it won't go over 100,000, and so I think he's being brought in as kind of a Trumpian sort of no BS character to lift the conversation here. I think that this was part of a bigger plan, a continuity of government plan, or what are you referring to? Well, I mean, more just like I wouldn't. It's hard to say plan as in the only plan where people would sign up for something like this is a kind of Book of Revelations or biblical plan, where Christed individuals or Freemasons would agree to, in a metaphysical way, play roles in a kind of matrix version of the sort of egregore, challenging the collective ego, if you like. I think someone like Craig absolutely would see that as appealing and would want to fight crime, and fight the sort of darkness within humanity and bring us to a better place where we have an infrastructure like Bitcoin, so I think he's had help and I think he's playing a role, but ultimately it fits him like a glove, to be a kind of schoolroom, educator for us and for the world. And when Kurt, poor Kurt's doing the same thing. And I think we've all been there with these disastrous conversations with family and friends because, the well is so poisoned with all these psyops. So it's lovely to be here in this space and just have a bit of healing from that, and with peers who kind of get it, and at least we can have some solace here together today.
Good stuff. I'd like to give it another brief analogy. So during World War II, the Nazis invaded France, one of the first places they invaded, because Hitler always wanted to roll tanks into Paris. And if you can find the picture of Hitler and a couple of his key advisors and generals with the biggest, dumbest smiles on their faces, posing in front of the Eiffel Tower in their full military regalia and the whole thing. It's actually, in the context of, bros being bros, it's like, oh man, there's a bro photo if I ever saw one. Now, they installed what was called the Vichy government in France. So they installed essentially a Nazi sympathetic, but ultimately fake government in France for the duration of the war. But there was I'm American, so I'm going to say Charles de Gaulle. I'm sure there's a much more elegant French way to pronounce Charles de Gaulle, but ultimately he refused to recognize that group and led essentially Free France. It has a long French name that I'm not going to butcher, but they maintained the continuity of the legitimate French government during that whole period. And I think that's a great example for where we are in the Bitcoin civil war, in that, some truly Machiavellian folks have taken over the mind space and the infrastructure and the investment, and the whole zeitgeist of Bitcoin has been taken over by the bad guys. And there's a very small group of people that are just saying, you know what, I just simply don't recognize it for all of these reasons. I can back them up academically, philosophically, and various other mechanisms by which I can back up my position on the Bitcoin wars. But I see us very much as, the real Bitcoin in exile. And eventually I believe we will be vindicated, just for having the consistency of narrative and everything else. Because again, I believe we have the truth on our side about Bitcoin. There's all kinds of other nonsense. There's a lot of politics. There's a lot of mismanagement. There's plenty of things to criticize from our side, like about our side during the block size war. But I believe ultimately we have the truth on our side about Bitcoin. And I think that's crucial. And I think that plays out for us eventually.
Nice. Reno, if you want to respond to that, feel free to. Everybody, please retweet the space, follow your host. And if you guys want to come up and raise questions or comments, feel free to request.
I just thought I'd go into the 911, which Craig signposted in his lawsuit, which I think it's always important to pay attention to his the details of what he's doing. It's not. I think it's very deliberate what he's doing. So yeah, then in numerology, the number of 911, which is a very important number in America, obviously, is 9 represents the spiritual enlightenment, and the selflessness and compassion of higher, and the pursuit of higher wisdom. And the 1, especially when doubled, is like the master number for spiritual awareness and connection to divine guidance. So the combination is spiritual awakening, as we've seen at this time. So it's Craig is very he's very deliberate in what he's doing, and I think it's, from what I'm seeing, everything is very clear that it's going down this path of a huge awakening, where it's this way more than just money, as we know. It's about like sovereignty of data, and I think we're very fortunate to. There's 2 ways we can go when we go into an argument with someone. We can go into who's right and who's wrong, based on truth. But it's easy to forget the emotional process that people have to go through. And I love the analogy of giraffe and jackal within the mindset of like the operating system of the human brain. Where the giraffe has a large heart, and it's all about needs and feelings, needs of life and feelings are, the emotion. And the jackal is all about, this sort of death on consciousness. It's similar to Harry Potter, where you have Voldemort and Harry, and the electricity on the forehead. It's positive and negative. So yeah, I think it's going to bring us into a more metaphysical interpretation of life, and starting to decode a lot of our stories, and ultimately take us more, because we're coming. It's lifting us out of poverty, out of scarcity. So what is then the purpose of life? So it's a real tipping point now for this. It's. I think the whole point of Jesus carrying the cross and the crucifixion, which is what it's going to feel like when the bubble bursts. Imagine losing all your money. in BTC. It's going to be rough. And so, yeah, I would just encourage people to learn more about that communication style of needs and feelings and observations without evaluations and simple requests and to move more into gratitude rather than who's right and who's wrong. Because I'm sure there's going to be the next challenge, whatever, some meteor coming to Earth or whatever's going to be the next challenge or aliens, there's going to be something else. And if people here on the forefront of this and make a lot of money out of BSV and can move forward and be a light in the world, it has to be for something that is, we're here for a reason. We ideologically or philosophically, we have people that are here now have their heads screwed on in some way, whether we realize it, how that happened to us or not. But we were able to put down some form of bias or prejudice and to fight for the truth, and that's a really, I think that I'd like to hear more from people about how they what was that fire inside of them, just wanting to know. So, yeah.
Miss Casey Nicole, I see you doing a lot of thumbs up and likes. So why don't you have any comments on that? Questions, comments?
I just really love nonviolent communication with Marshall Rosenberg, and I definitely have tried to bring that to the BSB table a couple times in the past. So thank you for bringing that up, Reknow.
Nice. Absolutely. And one of the things that you mentioned there, which I thought which was relevant here, is the data sovereignty side, and potentially that could be like a 1776 revival, where it really is a freedom thing. Like, are you really free or do you forfeit your data over to other entities? I mean, because we're in a digital world now, and how free are you if you just forfeit everything over to Silicon Valley companies? And really, I mean, is that the world we're going to continue living in? So I think that it could be a revival potentially. So,
are people aware of Estonia and how they have done data? Has anyone heard of that before? In relation to the government has to ask, they have their information stored, and the government has to make requests. So you don't have to fill out forms anymore. Your information is all in a cloud. And say some government organization needs access to your information, they simply send you a request, that department, and then you can accept or deny, and then obviously there's consequences, but it goes through a legal process of simply consent to your data that the government might.
Okay, so they don't do it behind closed doors. They actually give you the notice and opportunity.
Exactly. And it's very, very, they reduce, so it reduces bureaucracy, obviously, all this hassle with paperwork, but at the same time it's kind of like nonviolent communication, where it's very much about consent, and something has changed, and a continual check-in of your consent to this process.
A continual check into consent. I like that. I'm surprised Kurt hasn't heard about that.
About what now?
I mean, just history better than anybody I've seen. So I mean, that is
I don't know about that. I'm just a lying scammer.
Oh yeah, is that what you are now? Okay.
Yeah, let's just ask. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, we haven't heard from Brett Banafe. What are you up to, dude? Manifestable.
Yeah, maybe I'll chime in. I want to rewind a little bit to some of the stuff that we were talking about right in the beginning of the chat, and then sort of fast forward a little bit to what we were talking about at the end. But yeah, going back to a little bit of what Kurt was talking about and Sirtoshi was talking about, Kurt used the term consolidating the UTXO set, and that's that's obviously what's happening. But another way to frame that or to phrase that is to centralize the UTXO set or to censor the UTXO set. It's truly censorship, because what it is it's saying I as a node operator am so lazy effectively and so unwilling to make hardware adjustments and upgrades necessary for the network to thrive in a emergent kind of peer-to-peer fashion, that we're going to restrict the amounts of data and information that are capable of actually being transmitted. And so what you do is you take this liberating technology, this technology that has the ability, and I truly think that we use these concepts, or we talk about things like scaling to billions of transactions per second, and when we think of it in technical sense, it's impressive. Obviously, it's really, no technology has been able to do this in the past. Or if they are able to do it in the past, obviously there are attack vectors that limit that technology's ability to be useful to the public at the edges of the network. But there's also another way to look at this, which isn't necessarily just in the technical sense and how impressive that is, but it's in the social sense. It's the ability to scale to the entire globe. And I want to also talk about why we set this conversation up, right? It was initially a conversation that we set up and invited, key members of BTC to discuss this with us, right? And we always have these invitations to the BTC narratives, like, hey, that's really great that people should believe in the technology that they stand behind, right? So you believe in BTC. Okay, come onto a debate stage with us and discuss it like normal civil people, make that great again. And unfortunately, the invitation was made to Larry. Larry's great at chiming in his thoughts here and there through the through posts, etc., but unwilling to come on stage and defend them. As we see repeatedly. And you can go back to maybe one of the only examples of someone that actually took the stage against Kurt is, Shinobi and Peter McCormick. And, they completely, with Hotep Jesus, if you haven't had a chance to check that video out, go and check that out. But, what happens is the weight of their argument fails under scrutiny. That's the problem. And so now excuse me. Now the argument works really well when the key things that are important to people, like their sovereignty, like their ability to freely exchange, when these things aren't the focus of the argument, when instead the focus of the argument is like, hey, look over there. Don't you enjoy, the fiat value of your asset going up? Yes, I do enjoy that. Obviously, it makes sense why you would enjoy that. But it's about framing the narrative in such a way, and don't worry what's going on behind the scenes. If you've ever seen Wizard of Oz, it's like, hey, don't worry about that disheveled man that's behind the green curtain over there. Pay attention to the fireworks that we're putting on display for you over here, right? And the idea is that the fiat value effectively is the master. We're sort of like, we're hypnotized by its what it does for us, and we think that this is what wealth is. Wealth is just the accumulation of this dirty, excuse my language, but disgusting kind of like fiat power, because effectively at the end of the day it's not a true power of sovereignty. It's a power that there is a finger on the pulse that's behind the green curtain that you can't see. And so he's unwilling effectively to step on the stage and debate and discuss these ideas. But really, when you get down to it, when you say like, okay, well, what is your argument against that? He'll eventually break down and say, well, the argument against scaling Bitcoin is that no one will use it. Like you're all this is for naught. You're building millions of transactions per second, hundreds of millions, billions of transactions per second, but no one wants that, right? No one wants free exchange. No one wants their own sovereignty of their own data. And it's like, at least I appreciate, at a certain point, he breaks down and just is honest. Like, no one wants Bitcoin. Okay, then don't make your argument about that other stuff. Make your argument about that. I don't think Bitcoin is valuable. I don't think people will want it. I don't think markets will use it. And it's like, great, then you're basically saying that, you know, a scaled global digital free economy for the world to transact privately, again, because all of these things, there's layers below what we're talking about. We're talking about high fees, etc. It's not just high fees, it's also the ability to be private. It's also the ability to exchange freely. It's also the ability for a lack of censorship, etc. And what's so ironic is that their main argument against BSV is that, oh, it centralizes and consolidates the node operators who have the aptitude, the fortitude, and the technical know-how and skill to actually scale to provide these services to the planet. And it's like, yes, that's naturally a part of the process, right? It's like in the same way that when we have an Olympic race to determine who the fastest human beings are on the planet, we don't hold it with a billion people on a track that's a billion, you know, lanes wide. Why don't we do that? Because it's meaningless. We can determine, you know, those locally, and we can find the people who are the most fit to provide those services, speaking about node operators, and then we can put them in situations where they're economically incentivized to provide virtue and this capability for human beings to have sovereignty to exchange with each other privately. And it's like, you know, that their argument will never be able to take that down. And if they can take it down, then all they're doing is providing a deeper service to humanity, because they're just providing a better way to do it. They're never going to do that because it requires work, it requires effort, it requires skill, and it requires aptitude. And the counter argument is basically the entire thing that Bitcoin was built to solve and built to undermine, which is the proof by Sybil support.
Back to the point you raised there about this debate that Kurt had with Peter McCormick, it sounds like, in Chernobyl. Can you take us back into that, Kurt? I'm kind of vaguely familiar with that, but what happened on that?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny because they broke the rule, right? So if you get really good at studying like PR and social manipulation, those kind of things, like Edward Bernays, Saul Alinsky, Gustav Le Bon, Walter Lippmann, Sigmund Freud, like these people that studied, how to control the narrative, and then therefore how to move the culture in a direction that maybe it doesn't even like, but you convince it to go that direction. One of the key things that you do is you don't engage with an argument that you're going to lose. And so this is why, you see politicians, especially when they're guilty, like the most guilty politician and like the journalist who's obsessed with them, right? There's always there's some muckraker who's like, you know what? This president is going to go down for this thing. They are rotten to the core because of X, Y, and Z. And they commit their lives to the journalism of that concept. Well, anytime you would ask that politician, like, hey, what do you think of, let's just say like, Bill Clinton and Rush Limbaugh, or like they were, this is now 30 years ago or more, where they just were in this diametric opposition to each other. But Rush was the smaller character. He was quite big, but he was the smaller character. And so you can see there are plenty of times when people would ask like Clinton's press secretary or Bill Clinton himself, and be like, well, what do you think of Rush Limbaugh? And he was very smart. Oh. Clinton was a brilliant communicator himself. He would do exactly this. He would either say, who do you mean? And, pretend to not know him. Or if it came up too many times, he would purposely mispronounce the name. He said, I don't know who Russ Limbaugh is. And, that kind of thing. Or he'd say, the things that Russ Limbaugh says are, they're just silly. Who would engage with that? and it's the exact same thing where, if I'm making a point, or if somebody like Jack Pitts is, has a long thread making a lot of interesting, like talking about the economics, talking about the history, talking about the game theory, like he's getting into all these things, and it's like, you know what? And so you need to turn it into, we don't talk to those people. It would lower me. It would be a lessening of my position for me to have a conversation with you. And this is what happens anytime, I make it all the time when people will attack me or attack BSV or whatever, say, hey, you know what? You choose the moderator, you choose the content, you can even pre-plan the questions with your moderator, and I'll just come on and debate you. We can do it live, or you can record it and you can broadcast it however you see fit. And it's always like, you see them. I mean, well, I don't have the time for something like that, especially not with the likes of you. And the reason for that is exactly that. If you study Saul Alinsky or Bernays or any of these other people, you don't put yourself in a situation where you're ever going to look silly, because if you're in power, you have all the risk, and that's where they are. This is why a Samson Mao or an Adam Back or a Gregory Maxwell or any of these people that are sort of these pillars of small block philosophy and success, like they will not be caught dead having a conversation with somebody who questions them. And even if there's somebody that is of similar stature, this would be like a Roger Ver, for example. I think Roger, at some point 6 or 7 years ago, had a debate with one or two guys. I think he debated like Tony Vase and a couple other people on that side. And Roger is another. He's actually a pretty masterful communicator. And it's like, okay, we didn't do so well there. We're just not doing that ever again. And it's the same thing with me. So I hopped on with Peter McCormick and Shinobi, who's Brian Trolls and goes by a bunch of other aliases. And then Connor Murray was with me also. So I don't deserve all the credit. I may not even deserve half. But we did about 3.5 hours with Hotep Jesus asking his questions about Bitcoin. So you can go rewatch that. And this was circa, gosh, this is going to be 2019 or 20 now. So it's a while back. But just asking a lot of questions about, okay, what is Bitcoin? What is a node? Why? Okay, what is your basic disagreement with each other? What about Bitcoin privacy? What about Lightning Network? Does Lightning Network actually solve these problems? So he's asking a lot of like, not deep questions, but a little deeper than surface level after the first bit. And it's funny because initially Peter McCormick didn't even want to communicate with me. Like he was very resistant to having any comms like appearing with me because it's bad for his brand. And so at some point he just kind of got strong-armed into it because the community was kind of calling for it. And we went again, like 3.5 hours or so. And after the show, and actually I've shown this clip before of at the end of the show when it was like, hey, any closing thoughts? And Peter's closing thought was, I hate to say it, but Kurt, I quite like you. And and so it was funny. We had kind of a laugh and a digital handshake between each other. And and actually I was happy with it. I actually enjoyed talking to him too. I've actually been a fan of Peter as a broadcaster for a very long time. I think he's a talented broadcaster, but despite the fact that I disagree with him about a host of things. But and then off the air, so we had a little bit of a postmortem. We had probably all talked for 10 minutes off the air, off the broadcast, and we shared a lot of personal stuff and whatever, man. Like wished each other well, wished each other's families well, that kind of thing. And then this was before any of the lawsuit stuff. So this was before Craig was controversial for being for being a lot of those things. He was only controversial for maybe or maybe not being Sirtoshi. But the lawsuit stuff, like the hodl-not stuff, none of that stuff had happened yet. And so we were on okay terms, me and Peter. It was kind of funny. And then now, I mean, at this point, I think, we've had so much bad blood since, but I always bring it up. And I always bring up, like, Peter, you want to treat me like a member of some cabal that was involved in all of this stuff. But I'm just a guy. I am just a guy who liked big block Bitcoin. And, when we put our egos aside to talk, we enjoyed talking so much that we talked for hours and hours and hours late into the night and came to realize that, hey, we actually agree on a ton of things that actually matter. We disagree about the value of the limits of a distributed database. And that is not a reason for us to hate each other or want each other to suffer, all these things. And I think he just hates the fact that I don't hate him the way he hates me, but he's very emotional about it. And I get it. I mean, he's gone through a lot more than I have because of all of it, but he's also come out largely on top. I mean, the guy owns what do they call it? A football team. It's a soccer team for my American listeners, but and whatever, man. He's retired as the biggest podcast in the history of Bitcoin, and he's done quite well for himself. But for some reason, there's a grudge against. By all means, I understand his grudge against Craig, but I don't know why he's going to have a grudge against me simply because of proximity to the concept of BSV and all this other stuff. But they don't talk to us because it's bad PR for them to talk to us. It degrades them because they can't make themselves look brilliant in the context of somebody who's willing to challenge their premises, and that's the problem.
Nice. Brilliant back and forth there. So open up. Anybody, go ahead. Comments, questions, Sirtoshi, Alex, Brett, anybody else, feel free to jump up. All right, no hands up, no comments. So then I'll just chime back in. So yeah, back to the McCormick thing. I mean, for that piece of history, it sounds like how it's going to play out here. I mean, this. What do you think is going to happen with this passing off case, Kurt? I mean, does this have any merit?
I mean, the law. I am not nearly as confident in the law as Craig and a lot of his allies. I think the law is fickle. It shouldn't be. Fundamentally, I think Craig is right. But the problem is we live in a world that is dominated by the Hegelian dialectic, especially in a place like the UK. I mean, the UK is not some bastion of conservative ideology about the law. Like nobody's actually breaking out, John Locke and Blackstone and these are the decisions by which we're going. It's not how it is. It's, we have a deep conflict between what are radical, they would call progressive values as they pertain to law, versus, I think in the United States is having quite a backlash to that same concept right now, where it's, you get the 1776 and close the Department of Education and hey, we tried neoliberal fascism and turns out we don't like it. And so we're kind of going the other direction here in the US, at least for the time being. And so I see it as I see it as very risky, both for Craig and for Bitcoin, because you're putting it in the hands of the easiest people to corrupt, right? Like how do you leave it in the hands of judges whose time and incentives and relationships you can't audit, right? And so it's very risky, in my opinion. And again, I think he's right. I think the argument is fundamentally sound. I'm also worried just about the size of the case. Like he's going against a team of very talented lawyers who are funded by very wealthy and guileful people. And Craig kind of taking it on his own. Like he's a smart guy, he's a hardworking guy, but it's like so is Napoleon Bonaparte, and he got beaten by a bunch of starving Russian soldiers and British soldiers and this kind of thing, because he was overconfident in his battle plan. And so I'm supportive conceptually, but I'm probably not going to be placing deep bets on the outcomes or anything on my own. But for a long time, I've told everybody for years and years since the Bitcoin Civil War started is don't split your coins. Like the only way that you can remain rational throughout all of the nonsense is to not politicize your portfolio. So that's my take.
Nice. Let me just add some commentary, then we'll go to you, One Love, and we see Jack has joined us as well. Okay, so or some color. Now
just quickly, Gavin.
Go ahead.
Just a quick one there to add into Kurt's comment about Napoleon. Was Napoleon overconfident, or was he stabbed in the back by his financial backers?
Well, and that's a good point, but the point still applies. So, it's Craig could be right. His plan could be right. It could be well executed. And he gets stabbed in the back on the way in the door, either figuratively or actually. And it's a very risky. I don't like the risks of it.
It's good.
But I understand why he's doing
No,
it.
it's very good perspective for everybody, because I mean it's important to hear these things, and that the law is not always fair. And just to give some perspective, I mean there's in the U.S. now, he's obviously UK, so this wouldn't be precedent, but in the U.S. there had never been a self-represented party to even make it and win in the Supreme Court ever in history. So,
sure.
so now that changed only within the last 5 years in this Rod class gun case. But just to give you some perspective, Craig is representing himself. So in the entire history of the U.S., all these years, it had never happened all the way. Now that didn't mean a person didn't ever win a case. Of course, they win a lot of cases, but just to give you perspective, it never had gotten all the way to the Supreme Court by self-represented party until the last 5 years, or for the first time. So you're looking at a real David versus Goliath type of case. Take it as entertainment. I mean, but do not bet. I'm just saying, if you're doing a little bit, I see them in the audience. If you're betting, yeah, a little bit is probably the way to go. I wouldn't, be mindful of the risks involved.
One thing that Craig has got on his side is the 1215 Magna Carta .40, where it says, to no man shall we sell, to no man shall we deny, to no man shall we delay justice.
No doubt.
But it's just the court system at the moment is not actually operating under legislation. It's operating under the private oath that all members of the Bar Guild have sworn to the Bar Guild.
Yeah, there's a lot of unknowns,
they're not
right?
actually upholding.
These are the issues with the courts. There's unknown factors that we don't know about sometimes. Sometimes it's part of the club. Either it's called the just us system for a reason, us, and you're not in it. So that's part of the reason. Let's go over to One Love. She has her hand up.
Oh, well, actually, I was going to defer to Alex if you had anything else technical to say, because it was more kind of closing thoughts or something like that.
Okay, we'll
Alex,
add closing thoughts. Stay up on the stage, and we'll come back to you then.
Yeah, I will.
Let's go back to Alex Fauvel.
Not really technical stuff for you, One Love. Like I said, I've been researching it in depth, down to being able to explain it to basically a 10-year-old for a couple of months now for a project that hopefully will be ready by January. But I had my hand up because I wanted to say that Sirtoshi, you're absolutely right. They administrators. They are not legislators. It's a business court. It's not. Although they do, you have to respect the legal authority of these administrators. It's not under common law. It's not under the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta is irrelevant these days, unfortunately. It should have been more like a constitution of the UK, but it kind of got eroded away, as we've actually witnessed with Bitcoin as well.
Yeah,
well, also Halsbury's law, Halsbury's law of 2011, which is the most authoritative law in the law of England and Wales. It actually states specifically there is no authority for administrative courts in this country, and no act can be passed to legitimize them. So you don't actually even need to go into court to represent yourself, because they're nothing but administration courts. Right. You just simply put the paperwork in. And this is kind of like one of the things where I think Craig actually would have success if he just simply went in and submitted all of his evidence via paperwork using postal mechanics, so the evidence couldn't be disregarded by the judge. That's it. Yeah, there is so much evidence that just can't be denied, but we'll see what happens.
Nice. Okay, I want to go to Jack as well. So I don't know if you, Jack, we've been talking about this passing off case, and also lessons from the block size debate. I don't even remember if you were around back then during the block. I mean, I know I started following you when I learned about you in 2019. So would you what is your Bitcoin story? I don't even remember. Were you around in the block size debate?
I was actually asked at my investment fund in late 2010 what I thought of Bitcoin. I was embarrassed because I was the technology analyst, and I'd heard of Bitcoin through that one. I think it was a Gawker article or some kind of one of the articles from that day, or one of the websites that was popular back then published like the first real Bitcoin article. And I just read the article and was like, oh, so it's like fake money for geeks or nerds or whatever. So I just kind of dismissed it, unfortunately. Wish I hadn't. And then, I think he was asking because it had gone to like $10 or something. And it had somebody had told him that the best performing asset of 2010 was actually this thing called Bitcoin, because it gone up 80 zillion% or something. So that was my first experience. And then I paid mild attention to it because I was very interested in the space. And I guess the 2013 kind of comes to mind, where I remember I was following Tim Armstrong because I was interested in how people bought Bitcoin. And I think I had a thesis on it in 2012 that it could do pretty well post Mt. Gox disaster. And not because I believed in Bitcoin, I didn't, but just as a sort of speculative thing. And I just started noticing that the Coinbase leadership was like really favorable towards this one thing, which didn't really make sense to me because things were looking like they were going to fork, and I couldn't understand why an exchange would care that much which fork sort of won, because they could trade both. And if you're truly in the middle, which obviously they probably weren't, then you wouldn't care because you're just making money from the transactions and you don't really care if they're trading A or B, you're making money on both. So that's sort of my history of paying attention to the war that was going on within Bitcoin, but which I didn't truly understand, but just my gut feeling from lots of experience was that I thought the people who eventually became Bitcoin Cash seemed to be more honest appearing, should I say. And that was before I ever looked into any of the technical details or how to understand Bitcoin. And that started in late 2018. But my latest thing is very applicable to today's topic because I've been really struggling now that, things have gotten rough. I don't know, I think probably have eight or nine projects out there right now, some of which are completely flattened to zero, some of which are in mothballs, some of which are still going, which is great. But it's tough times because there's no capital in BSV, and yet you have to stare and look at 20,000 ridiculously themed cryptocurrencies that all have plenty of capital to do all kinds of things. So it's very frustrating, which leads to a period of self-examination. And so I've kind of this isn't the first time this has happened. So when this happens, I usually kind of focus on something that I view as a potential flaw in Bitcoin, because you want to kind of attack the things that you're not completely sure of. And so, I've been going up the chain of command and talking to a lot of people. I've talked to a lot of people at Bitcoin Association, talked to a lot of you guys, spent a lot of time with Kurt. And it just comes down to governance, and that's kind of what this topic is about. And I would present a couple of things, and these are things that, ironically, Craig says over and over again, and some of these things challenge some of the things we've been saying in this room, which is, number one, he says that, the miners are the police, basically. So Kurt here is the biggest cop in the room. And that comes with great responsibility because he's the one that has to enforce the rules. And in order to enforce the rules, since there's no king of Bitcoin, another Craigism, is Kurt has to decide what the rules are. And that's very interesting. And then another thing that's commonly said is longest chain. And that's, I believe, in the white paper, so tightly associated with the word honest. Now, I don't know if supporting one Bitcoin versus another makes you honest, but I think that the idea behind the word honest is that an honest miner ought to value, and I think I'm going to misquote this a little bit, ought to value participation in the system rather than attacking it. And you can fine tune that quote because that's also, I think, in the white paper. And that's super important. And then the last thing that isn't in the white paper, but Craig also says all the time, is he talks about the Stackelberg game, which is Bitcoin. And that has stuck in my mind for a long time, because if you just try and read a Wikipedia or a research paper on Stackelberg theory, it's not fun. It takes you a while to get through it. And that's coming from someone like me who's comes from the math field. So It's not easy. But to me, to simplify Stackelberg, it just means minorities can win. And what is BSV but not a minority of honest miners like Kurt here who have interpreted the Bitcoin white paper and its rules and has incorporated Gorilla Pool, for which I'm an investor. So I'm also have my nuts on the anvil along with his. And Kurt can be sued and I can be sued, not personally. Luckily, through establishment of corporations like Gorilla Pool, they can only take what's in Gorilla Pool, so that's great. The law helps us there. But the point is that Kurt himself, as leader of Gorilla Pool, takes on a great responsibility, which is Craig can sue him, right? If Kurt decides that, hey, I think there should be more than 21 million coins, like Amari, the true narcissist, even though they keep calling Craig narcissist, I would say Craig's the opposite of a narcissist. And Amari is a narcissist because Amari's really wants changes which favor him as leader and control. Whereas Craig is constantly, and I would argue annoyingly, shirking what I would think are his duties. But it's taken me until kind of this week to realize he's not shirking his duties. He's actually setting a precedent for how the world is actually not only supposed to work, but how it's always worked, which is the governance of Bitcoin is really you. And by you, I mean, you can sue for estoppel. You can sue because you built your whole life and grandma's life savings based on 21 million and it would never change. And you have, built your business based on small casual transactions that have cheap prices. And so you can sue. Now, maybe you can't personally because you don't have the money to sue, but someone can. And someone is. And I think that's what's great about Craig's estoppel lawsuit that's new, which is he's not suing as Satoshi. He's suing as Craig, user of Bitcoin, who read the white paper and said, oh, look, the white paper says small casual transactions. And today's fees in BTC are $3.48. It doesn't really apply. So there's something wrong. And what he's saying is, you can't call it Bitcoin. Because I can read the white paper like any normal person and read that the Bitcoin is described by the white paper, by the establisher of the protocol, and it doesn't match what you guys are doing. And furthermore, it has harmed me economically and various other ways. And so I think what Craig is trying to say is there is no alternative to the courts, because the alternative to the courts is chaos and revolution. And while I can say that I believe in some of those things, obviously I live in a country that started with a revolution, I can also say that revolutions have costs, and it's really not the civil way of doing things. And ultimately, things happen anyway. I mean, all you have to do is point to South Africa and North America slavery, and you'd realize that war or no war, it might change the timing, but eventually the outcome's kind of the same. Slavery is taken away eventually. But what I would say is, instead of fighting, Craig by taking the law into his hands, realize that it really is the governance system, because the honest chain is the longest chain, and the longest chain is the one that survives, and the one that survives is based on the one that works. And so you're all here because you believe that no matter what BTC does, it will ultimately fail because it doesn't work. And you're also here because you believe that BSV will work, because the whole point of the system is to establish a competitive system such that the fees go down, not up. And we don't know where those fees will finish off, but we hope that it's less than the 10 to 30 cents that Visa charges, right? And that's also in the white paper. So I think what I've come to terms with, as I occasionally beg Craig to come out and say, listen, you need to establish your Satoshi because you're the smartest person in Bitcoin. I'm not saying you're infallible, but you're the person that understands your own system the best. And his constant reply is basically like, Bitcoin has no king. And so I think the Satoshi, whether he is Satoshi or not, is irrelevant. What's actually more relevant is his estoppel case, because that's what establishes who the real Satoshi is. So maybe they've always been right. We're all Satoshi. But we're not Satoshi in the sense that we invented Bitcoin. but we're all part of the system that enforces the rules. So it's not just all on Kurt's shoulders. It's also on your shoulders as, my grandma was screwed because you set up SegWit, Taproot, and 75 other things, and now her coins from 2010 don't work anymore. And we're supposed to be rich right now, but we can't even execute a simple transaction.
Yeah, it's supposed to be rich. And ultimately, you've got this, the problem we saw just recently is 18% of the users on BTC are unable to even move their coins because of the fees were over $3.80. And that was just yesterday. Now, tomorrow it could be more. And then all of a sudden, more users are unable to move their coins. I mean, they're stuck on there. So, Alex, you got your hand up, buddy. Go ahead. Fauvel.
Yeah, sorry, hang on. There is a couple of things Jack's mentioned, especially from his early days. Why did Coinbase care? And I think that's a great way of discovering who's not being, because honest thing, but it's like reasons why someone might not be honest. Are they being pragmatic? That's a judgment that you can make based on analysis of what they're doing. And Coinbase wasn't being pragmatic. Like John said, they were taking a side when they really didn't have to. They used to be a company that was only Bitcoin, but by that point, I think they'd added Litecoin and maybe Ethereum. And they could have just made money trading between them. So that you would have thought that was great. But if they wanted a fork when there was no real reason to have a fork, if SegWit 2x got in and whatnot, then yeah, why would they take a side? It doesn't make sense. And then the other things were, John, you might have to remind me of a couple of things you went over.
That'd be a little bit tough. I don't know what you are deriving, but basically, I was just talking about governance and the fact that there is no
the law.
official governance, but there is a type of governance for Bitcoin, which is decentralized in a way.
Yeah. So the other thing is that the law is the ultimate king of a nation, and you don't necessarily want to have to go through a revolution if you can avoid it, obviously, for very many other reasons.
100%. No, let me comment on that, because a lot of times I'm seeing people who are involved in cryptocurrency and they believe that it's the code. The code is the law. And that is not the case, because you've got these courts. If they execute an order, you win in court, and the judge execute an order, and you have to, let's say they take it to Kurt, and they say, Kurt, you need to reverse this transaction. If a judge ordered Kurt to do that, he's going to follow it. He's not going to not follow the judge's order. I mean, that's the law. That's,
yeah.
And so,
I mean, the other thing is that if the law is the ultimate ruler, which law do you choose to prosecute under? Well, Craig has chosen British law. And you could have prosecuted it in China maybe, but good luck with that. So really it's about choosing which jurisdiction is most favorable, but also is most important, because no one's going to pay attention to the small Caribbean islands courts, really. So it's a big statement of that, and this is the first. Sorry, I got another call. This is not a case that's got anything to do with the Satoshi identity. This is all about what they did to Bitcoin. The previous cases have all had something to do with Craig and Satoshi.
Right.
This case has nothing to do with Satoshi, other than the fact that we believe in this room that Craig is the one. Craig is Satoshi, and Satoshi is prosecuting it.
Let me make a prediction as to what's going to happen first. And the first thing that will happen, or we're going to expect next, is going to be motions to dismiss, saying this has already been decided. They already decided the Satoshi matter. He cannot bring this stuff. And that, so just expect that one 1,000% is going to happen. Okay. And of course it's not, we all know that's not relevant because that case is already decided and he's not claiming to be Satoshi, but that's going to be the attack. it's going to be the motion to dismisses that will be coming in. So, yeah, Kurt, you were mentioned a couple times as a minor. I mean, did you want to chime in on that, or Jack? Go ahead.
Wait, can I just close up
Alex.
my final thought, and then we'll go back to cut. Yeah, exactly. You know, it's got nothing to do with Satoshi, but the other thing is that how do I explain this? You'll have to come back to me if
Come
you
back
can.
to
I need
Alex.
to go and have
Get
dinner.
back to you, Jack.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things in law and even patents is a concept of prior art, and both of those fields rely on what happened in the past. And so I think the best test for Bitcoin as to how it's governed and how it is shaped and the longest chain and all that is just some of the attacks from the past. And so I've been kind of focusing on those a little bit, and I might get the date wrong. So Kurt, maybe you can correct me as historian, but I think it was August 15th, 2010, the chain, and I don't know how it's exactly done. I'm still studying that, but I'll just say the word interrupted at a certain block height, because in that block was the transaction that had a few inputs and a gazillion outputs that basically took 21 million and made it a joke. So basically someone had cleverly printed a bunch of Bitcoin, and the solution was that somehow, because some guy named Satoshi was closely monitoring it in August of 2010, saw it within an hour and realized that probably in that hour quickly saw that there was an overflow bug that allowed someone who put just a ginormous output to stack overflow. The ironically sort of gets into maybe unsigned integer area if you understand computer science, but it basically allowed him to have to make a decision, and that decision I don't think is studied enough. If I could criticize Craig for anything, I think that he should come out and describe that in detail, and it probably would help him in court as well, because then he'd be again putting his nuts on the anvil, so to speak, and making statements that other people can challenge about that history and how he handled it. But the way Satoshi handled it was they obviously corrected the bug, and the blockchain was somehow restarted. Now that's interesting because in August 2010, there wouldn't have been a lot of miners, and my guess is that Satoshi probably could have on a whim overwhelmed the network with his own miner, and probably had that in his back pocket anyway, knowing how he thinks about the governance of Bitcoin. But let's just think about that for a second. So the issuer of Bitcoin, the guy who has the only keys to the code base, changes the code. And so there's all these criticisms, oh, BTC, well, Satoshi did this and Satoshi did that, so, why can't we do stuff? And I think the answer is because they can do stuff, and they did. But what they did was, in one way, wrong, because they took the Bitcoin brand name. Number two, they have to live and die by what they did, and they are. And that's what the estoppel case is all about. That's what winning the COPA case is all about, and that's what filing the copyright for Bitcoin was for Craig. It's his challenge to them, saying you are liable. So sure, you can do what you want. I'm not going to stop you. I mean, that's like one of his favorite phrases. I'm not going to stop you from murdering someone, but you're going to have to deal with the consequences. And so I think the consequences are what Craig, not even as Satoshi, but as a user of Bitcoin who read the white paper and said, I've built my life and my reputation and everything that is me on top of this thing, and you have changed it, so I'm suing your ass. And that is the governance of Bitcoin. And it's taken me a long time to understand it because, like probably many people in this room, I always sit back and go, it would be best for me, Jack Pitts, if Craig would just move some Genesis coins, maybe the 1 million that were put in there in January mysteriously, if he just moves those and then declares that it's him, then he'll be given all kinds of kingship type I mean, this is like the story of George Washington, right? They're like, no, run again, run again. He's like, no. For the good of the country, sure, I could win a third term, but for the good of the country, he didn't say there need to be term limits, but he basically said, I need to not be made king because then we're right back to where we started with England, where the king rules. And so I think this precedent is more important to Craig, unfortunately, than my well-being, which I'm sure he might shed 1/4 of a tear for, and your well-being, which he might shed more tears for. But like, to him, he's a general running his version of Bitcoin in his life, and he's doing it not only just for him, but he also sees that it's the way that it has to be done.
Yeah, he's operating on the 100-year plan. It's not the, hey, move some coins and let's make some money. Oh, Kurt's been so patient with his hand up over there. I know he's dying to chime in. So Kurt, over to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit of color to the what did they call it? Was it the value overflow incident is what I think they call it? But yeah, there was like 180 million Bitcoins created in a transaction. But I think the timing of it is actually very, very interesting because it happened less than a day after a pretty intense back and forth conversation on the Bitcoin forum. And somebody was asking, I can't remember all the people that were involved, but somebody was asking about how to deal with reversible payments and how to deal with, hey, should we set up like an escrow contract, or, what if, how do we deal with, somebody pays me, then you got to wait for shipping and then all this stuff. Like, well, what if, like, how do we stop from getting screwed? And Satoshi, rather than addressing the question of, escrow is actually pretty simple to do in Bitcoin Scrypt, whatever. But Satoshi starts talking about, in a very Craigie manner, by the way, like, I'm just going to start talking highfalutinly about a hypothetical situation that maybe circuitously will get back to your question that you asked. And but he starts talking about, what if gold became lead when it was stolen and became gold again when it was returned? And then he goes into like a longer anecdote. And this is all public. You can read it now on Bitcoin Talk if you want. But everybody's sort of like obviously became very uncomfortable with Satoshi's anecdote amid this conversation about theft and returns and escrow and that kind of thing. Like, how do we deal with Bitcoin being, under the presumption of Bitcoin as an unstoppable, irreversible payment system? And Satoshi just shows up and instead of addressing the question, just explains it, and not even explains, he just simply asks the question, what if gold became lead when it was stolen and became gold again when it was returned? And so you have all the crypto anarchist types in the forums, like, getting a little hot under the collar and like, wait, what does he mean? Is there something about Bitcoin that I don't understand? And it was a very Satoshi response in the context of everything. It's actually a very Craig response to the conversation that was happening. And then, wouldn't you know it, a few hours later, a transaction originating from a faucet, a random anonymous faucet, we don't know who set it up or anything, a transaction poisoned the network and ran a script that generated millions of coins that should have never existed. And they created a massive problem with the blockchain. The first time there was ever a global consensus issue on Bitcoin. All amid this, and maybe they're unrelated. But I'm not a big believer in chance when it comes to these kind of things. I also don't think that it was just fateful. I think that it's possible that the lesson was from Satoshi that, look, I'm going to generate a transaction that makes us question our values about governance in Bitcoin, which then gets back to what Jack is saying, like, what do you do in these situations? I also had a recent conversation where I was talking about the 2013 incident where there was a split of the network. There was a bug based on changing the database type in Bitcoin Core version 0.8, if I recall. And so all the 0.8 nodes split away from all the 0.7 nodes. So we essentially had two Bitcoins that were out of consensus for half a day or something. And I explained that the summation of it, the solution of it, was that Peter Wella from Bitcoin Core essentially called the biggest couple of miners and said, hey, just run this software. We're going to orphan the new version, despite the fact that the new version is the longer chain with more proof of work. And, you know, I just explained that had happened. And there was a couple of those anonymous small blocker accounts that, you know, all right, let's break down what Kurt said. And let's explain this. Like, let's make sure that we're lionizing Peter Wella and that, you know, that it wasn't centralized for reasons X, Y, and Z. And all, just, you know, they're going into the like full blown PR, you know, okay, let's make sure that we explain why Kurt is both wrong and an asshole and ugly, and then let's explain all the reasons why, you know, Peter Wella is, you know, a giant of a man and did what needed to be done, and it wasn't just him, it was a committee thing, and, you know, whatever. But the funny thing is, I wasn't criticizing Peter. I actually think he made the right decision. I think he coordinated it well. I think he did what he did in ways that were appropriate. But the point is that a single core developer was able to coordinate an orphaning of Bitcoin, the longest chain with the most proof of work, etc., and get everyone to collectively agree that this other lesser chain is the real Bitcoin for reasons that aren't that fundamental about being the longest chain with the most proof of work. And so it was a community consensus situation. But
it was the Stackelberg game.
Yes, it was a Stackelberg game, that the smaller Bitcoin was the real Bitcoin for all kinds of reasons that weren't, you know, your basic pillars of what is Bitcoin. And so,
and did people running full nodes that had their mining turned off, did he appeal to them especially?
I think he ignored them completely. They probably so funny. I've never even checked, I don't think, but he may have used the alert key. Like, would he have put out a thing, or probably just put out a post on like the Linux forums and Bitcoin Talk and like, hey, if you're running version 8.0, you're not on Bitcoin, is what I guess most of the conversation was. And you can actually read the chat log. There's a chat log, I think it's from Linux forum, and it's Luke Dash Jr., it's Gavin Andreessen, it's Jeff Garzik, some of the other guys, and they're all saying like, Gavin's position was, sorry, the version 8.0 is Bitcoin. It's the longest chain with the most proof of work. End of story.
Yeah.
And, you know, and the other guys, it was a debate. And it was, and I think in that situation, it was a genuine debate because it was an emergency. And they needed to figure it out. But it's one of those things where it comes back to your values. Now, okay, what do I value and why? It's like being a sergeant on a battlefield. Like, well, the general or the Joint Chiefs of Staff or the president or, you know, whatever, there's the mission, you know. It's like you get out onto the battlefield and like 3 key guys get killed, and one of the guys that got killed was the guy that has, you know, the keys to actually finish the battle plan. It's like, okay, do you all just quit? Do you go back to base and say, well, yeah, but Dave died? Or you know, or did you push through and you try to win the consolation prize? And that's a battlefield decision. And it's not one that you can necessarily have a contingency plan for. So
let me
that's
just
what
jump
happened.
in here, Kurt. There's some, first of all, there's like 105 in the space. So please just hit the repost button on the space and try to get this to like 150 in the space at least. And so let me just comment here on there's some viral content with Alex Jones and Max Kaiser. They said now that the elections happened, Max Kaiser and Alex Jones have declared that this is it. You know, BTC is going to be here forever. In fact, it's going to be this deflationary thing. And it was like this interview. They made this, declaration that this is it. No looking back. You know, we're going to be, BTC is going to the moon. It's going to be up to $1 trillion, infinity. And, you know, Alex, hats off to him. I think he's probably more innocent and maybe plausible deniability. But Max Kaiser, he knows what's going on. And so I'm wondering if you could just comment here on, you know, for beside the court case, like the court case, we know if it could change things. But what about this hyper Bitcoinization theory that Daniel Krawitz has talked about, with where the miners do control the hash power and they could actually change things? I mean, is that an inherent risk in BTC?
I mean, it's an inherent risk on anything that isn't based on fundamentals. So, people in this conversation have brought up like the Magna Carta or John Locke or Blackstone's law, these kind of thing. And it's funny because, like, yes, you can bring it all the way to there. And I've brought up the Catholic Church, for example. And so the reason there is Protestant churches is because it was a faction of Catholics that thought that the Bible should be where all authority starts and ends. And then the split is that if you are Catholic after whatever 1515 or whenever the Reformation started, the thing that makes you Catholic is that you believe that the start and end of authority is the church itself. And so there is a schism on that concept. And it's kind of the same thing in Bitcoin, where it's a little bit like we're trying to, at least the honest people are trying to make an honest decision about distilling authority all the way down to its least common denominator, so that you can at least have a starting point by which you can be authentic and honest going forward. And then there's people that are just there to cause chaos and be trolls, and that's always a problem. But when it comes to authority, it's a little bit like, okay, in Bitcoin, is the authority Satoshi? Is the authority the white paper? Is the authority some mix of like the white paper, the code, and the commentary by Satoshi over the preceding 2 years? And it's very debatable. It's a philosophical argument. We have the exact same problem with like the U.S. Constitution, for example. Like, well, is the Constitution itself, the Bill of Rights, is the Bill of Rights part of the Constitution, or is it a separate document? Do they have the same authority, or is it, well, it's like, so you get into all of this nuance, and then nuance is where you get professional. This is why we have lawyers, and then lawyers are like, well, if I can make the argument that this word means one thing here and means a different thing there, I can build my whole career on winning victories based on, bizarre arcane technicalities. Now, Max Kaiser never saw a scam that he didn't love. So he is, on top of just being a gigantic prick, he is also a big spook. I mean, the guy, glows like a Christmas tree if you look into his background at all. But, you can go back. I'm sure Jack Pitts can remind you of him on like late night infomercials trying to shill like silver investment the same way that he's been shilling BTC the last, 12 years.
RT is Russian Times, by the way. So there's where the allegiances may lie.
Yeah, he's just a whatever, man. Like, he's an absolute mercenary for hire. Like, he's immoral in the same way that a hyena is immoral. He's just like, he's going to do what it takes to get blood on his teeth because he likes to eat. And, that's where he's at. So anything coming from Max, especially, the last couple of years, he's out there, he's on his knees calling, that Central American fascist dictator, I forget his name, Bukele, he's out there on his knees calling him daddy in front of everybody. And like, it's just the whole thing is just, it's revolting. It is like, he doesn't care that he's humiliating himself. He's out there saying Bitcoin or existed before God. Bitcoin is God. And I'm just like, this guy, I as far as Alex Jones goes, whatever. I think Alex is an entertainer. I think there was a time when Alex was authentic, and that time has probably passed. But it's the same kind of thing. It's and I've said the same thing about Trump and Bitcoin. It's Alex and Donald and all these people. They do not have a sophisticated view of Bitcoin, and so they're forced to go with the pamphlet version of Bitcoin. And then when you go with the pamphlet version of Bitcoin, you get the like, well, who do I talk to? It's like, okay, who are the top 15 people you talk to if you're interested in Bitcoin? And those people are all lying scammer, or they're literally, assets of 3-letter agencies or whatever. You get the Michael Saylor guys, like, robbed his own investors and lost $14 trillion and somehow avoided prison and is now a spokesperson for, Fink's vision of Bitcoin. Like, that's, is that relevant? It could be. And so, but you get Michael Saylor or Max Kaiser or any of the small, Samson Mao. He's another guy who's well, yeah, I explain Bitcoin to governments now. And like, that's another guy who is like definitely an asset of, of chaos and evil in the world. But so of course he's the guy that's explaining Bitcoin to governments. Like, he's exactly the kind of soulless, empty vessel that can shill anything to anybody. And so he's been put in the position to do that. And so here's where we are. Like, we're in a world where, you know, it's kill or be killed. And the problem with us is that if you want the truth to win, there's a certain morality that comes with that. And our enemies don't care if they have to cheat to win. And that's always a difficult thing to fight. It's a very hard way to win. So if we win, we have to influence not just the price or the businesses, and those things matter. Like, we need number to go up, we need businesses to be successful, but we also need to win a deep and underlying moral victory. And that starts with education, but that education needs to leave your brain and enter your heart at some point too, because you need to be committed to the actual battle. Now that's a big ask. I am asking a lot of you to commit more than you've already committed, which is more than most people have committed anyways. So sorry, but if you actually care about Bitcoin, the battle is going to be worse than it is today before it gets better. And happy Friday.
What is this inherent risk of these miners? I mean, do the miners actually, like, they're mining BTC, for example, you're running a node. And so if you're mining BTC, it's pretty is it profitable right now to mine in BTC, more profitable than mining on BSV?
A bit. I mean, it ebbs and flows. It has been more profitable to mine BTC than BSV for a good while, but it hasn't really been profitable to mine either chain for most of the last like 2.5 years, really. And the reason is pretty complicated, but it's always like that. So every cycle you mine and mine and mine and mine, and you're really lucky if you're basically just breaking even, paying your own bills. And then the price explodes and whatever, and that's the cycle. Like, oh, we got the whatever it is, 10,000% move up that we had all hoped for, and now my 36 months of mining at a loss or a break even has now turned into a massive profit. Great. That's a really hard thing to predict and hold out for. But I've told people since day one, if you want to mine, make sure you have a war chest that, you in 9 months, you can't be like, oh shoot, I need to shut this off. You really have to be thinking in like a 3 to 5 year cycle terms. And that's if the the cycles that have happened in the past continue to play out. The other thing that we're doing specifically in BSV is you want to be in the infrastructure space when and if this all takes off, because if all of a sudden we've got terabyte sized blocks and millions of coins exchanging hands and fees every block, well, you're going to have a really hard time, competing against Antpool when that's the paradigm. You have to front run those people to the game if you're going to win that game. It's maybe impossible to time, but timing the market is always impossible. So, it's complicated. It's difficult to run. Like, it's difficult to have that conversation with people because, like, I think everybody should mine a little bit. But it's also it's expensive, and it grades on your portfolio, and but maybe, and I'm in the probably camp, but maybe it pays off. But when and if it does, it's explosive. It becomes the jewel of your portfolio, but you got to be real good at holding your breath for it.
Nice. Okay, so anybody have any comments, questions, hands up? Go ahead, and now's a good time. Back over to you, Jack. If you have anything to add on this, yeah, please.
Well, going back to Kurt's elucidation, if that's a word. I guess as a dictionary owner, I should probably know that, but I'll be embarrassed myself and just say that he shed a lot of light on the August 15th, 2010 value overflow attack. And that level of detail, which I'd love to cut out of this clip and store as a file so I can reference it in the future. But stuff like that is why he's the best miner in the world. And I don't mean the best BSV miner. I apologize to anybody at Tall or maybe Craig or whatever, but like, you know, he's not just the best BSV miner, a big fish in a small pond, but he's the best miner, period. And, you know, Marathon and all these Hut 8 and all these guys, they have 1,000 times the capital of Gorilla Pool. However, the most important thing in business is the seed and the vision, and you know, Kurt has studied the important things rather than electricity costs and all these things. He studied those too, but the main thing Kurt represents is that Gorilla Pool is thinking about the long-term viable nature of Bitcoin and enforcing it, because whether he knows it or not, his nuts are on the anvil if he does it wrong. And so I wouldn't want to invest in a company that didn't understand the risk factors without having to write them in a 10K, which doesn't happen in private businesses, by the way. And so to me, just the fact that he knows that history in detail, and he's probably know it even better actually, but he knows it in more detail than anybody else, other than maybe the guy you referenced, the developer, and a couple of the miners, and maybe Craig or Sirtoshi. But the fact that he knows that history well and he wants to study it is the whole basis for, you know, why if you had not 2 nickels to scrape together, because then you probably shouldn't be investing in anything, just working. But if you have 1 billion nickels, you should probably invest in Gorilla Pool, not because it's going to make you an immediate 12-month return like some kind of meme animal, but because it's going to make you, as he just said, one day it'll be the jewel of your investment portfolio.
Yeah,
We hope.
Virgin Bitcoins. I mean, that's ultimately the holy grail, right? I don't know. It's like the ultimate jewel. So, okay, Brett Banafe, over to you.
Yeah, maybe I just want to take a second to go back a little bit to the argument about you know, the consolidation of the UTXO set and the implications, because I talked about that a little bit, you know, in my previous session. But what does that actually mean? The centralization of that UTXO set. So again, it has to do with the fees. You know, if it costs $3.58 to use the network, obviously you don't want to send anything that is, you know, less than maybe $30, or, you know, if you're desperate because, you know, that matches kind of the standard rate for something like Western Union or something like that, right? But if we've seen the fees go from, you know, effectively $0 to $3.58 in basically the last 15 years, what's to say that it won't go to $30.58 in the next 10 years? And then, you know, in the next 20 years, what about $100, $130, et cetera, right? So you just have this concept of this ever sliding scale. And again, that forces the consolidation of the UTXO set. But what it also does is it restricts and limits the number of people who have the access to that network, right? And this is sort of like, you know, Samson Mao famously said, you know, Bitcoin isn't for people who make less than $2 a day or something like that, right? So again, you know, it's $2 a day today, maybe it's $2,000 a day in 20 years or something like that. And so effectively what you're doing is you're taking this technology that has the ability to kind of, you know, completely change and transform the global economic structure to allow participation. Excuse me. And then you're saying effectively, great, let's set up a paywall right here and let's force people let's limit who can access that. And so what you're doing is you're taking the innovation that the UTXO model represents, and you're effectively saying, how do we make this more into an account-based model? Because the less and less, you know, effectively, like, we have the ability to have tens of trillions of UTXOs today, you know, but maybe 5 years from now, that's, you know, just a couple billion. You know, maybe 10 years from then, it's a few million. You know, effectively 100 years from now, or even 250 years from now, et cetera, you're looking at maybe we have consolidated that UTXO set down to a couple hundred different instances of spendable tokens. And then what we're effectively doing, the reason why I'm bringing all this up is to showcase that the long-term vision for the small blocker model is actually to convert the UTXO set into an account-based model that that can be widely distributed across these Raspberry Pis, right? Because it takes no hardware or no compute power or very minimal to do that. But effectively, what you're also doing in the same process is you're moving the real transaction capabilities off chain. So instead of me exchanging peer to peer with John, I'm just making an account, a ledger update to my Coinbase account or something like that, where all the Bitcoins themselves are all stored in these competing institutions, effectively the exact same system that we already have, except instead of those account-based models keeping track of the exchange of dollars, they're just keeping track of the exchange of Bitcoins.
Brett always leaves us with such wisdom. I love it, man. Beautiful. Okay. We haven't heard from Reknow or Sirtoshi in a minute. If any other people on stage, Reknow, did you have anything to add? Miss Casey Nicole, Reknow, go ahead.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah, it's lovely to be here, and yeah, I just always feel a little bit nervous and needing to connect and needing to just see the gravity of what is being witnessed here, and I like the idea of the miners and the the software developers and the three tiers of government, in a way, like the way that the American system of politics just has a safeguard of this 51% attack vector, that there's this trinary system of government, just to keep a system stable, a piece of infrastructure that we can hold as a foundational, like the 100-year plan, all the way through to the whatever year 2150, which hopefully from there we don't need a monetary system anymore. Like Elon Musk says, there'll be universal high income. So yeah, the big picture of all this really gets me excited, and I'm fully expecting to make some money, obviously, and have a bit more influence in the world. It's not just holding BSV. I think it's important to get involved in the mining, and I'd like to know more from Kurt about what the difference would be with someone investing in Gorilla Pool itself. Is that a miner or a node, and what he's expecting to play out with the governance. Because that's more interesting than having to rely on these stupid, Mickey Mouse courts. Although that is really important. I'm hoping that the more interesting conversations are, around, how do we, have a system that is a blockchain, a cornerstone of, look at a deep fake video that might have a huge impact on the world. Bitcoin is there to verify the data, the immutability of that picture. Who created it? Was it edited? If so, by who and when and how? So, yeah, I'm seeing this as a crucial part of education, and just a real basic sort of fundamental thing in this digital age to have data that we can rely upon. And of course, I'm like all of you guys, deeply, almost traumatized by a lifetime of, maybe that's a bit of a judgment there. I guess I'm needing more stability in trust, in my financial system. That's a really, and I'm feeling just really vulnerable, at times. So I guess I have a need for safety in that.
Yeah.
And then a need for cohesion as well, amongst feeling of sadness, amongst like the boomer generation, or I notice how disconnected they are, that, or maybe that's a judgment, or I'm just noticing how speaking with a lot of and a lot of people in general, just I'm noticing the disconnection, or just noticing how perhaps, yeah, I'm just noticing pain, in this at times, and
I feel like
in myself.
let me just jump in. I mean, without going into the philosophical stuff too much, I mean, I will say that I feel like there's some sort of a fundamental shift that's happened, at least here. I mean, and I'm saying just from an energetics and in San Francisco, I'm in the Union Square on it was on Tuesday or Wednesday of last week. I don't know, looking out, and I'm like, oh my gosh, something was different about the city. I can't even tell you. It was just looking out, I felt like this different energy that I've never felt before. It was in a positive way, a very positive energy, like and I've talked to a number of people and they felt the same way. And now I'm not talking politics at all. I'm just talking about some sort of an energetic shift that we've seemed to have felt, and it does seem to be in a positive way. So, Sirtoshi, he mentioned a lot of educational talk there. I know that's your passion. So did you have anything to add about the educational side? Yeah.
I mean, it's honestly basics. There are so many people I spoke to or I speak to who just simply don't even know the difference or can't tell you the difference between currency and money. And like people think they've got money in their bank accounts. They've got no money in their bank accounts at all. What you've got in your account is currency backed by no money whatsoever. It's all fraud. And until people actually even understand the difference between money and currency, how on earth are you going to understand, explain the difference between a digital commodity and a digital security? So I mean, I guess that's the thing is, though, fundamental education like that is only required at the beginning, because once number comes up, then you've got FOMO kicking in, you've got price discovery kicking in, and then you don't necessarily need the education. It comes back to the old analogy of like, do you really need to know the internal workings of a combustion engine when all you need is clutch, accelerator, brake kind of thing?
Just buy more and hold on, right? You don't really need.
But the thing is, the thing is, I mean, one of the reasons I do what I do is, it's only going to be needed for a limited amount of time, is that those who do understand the workings of the internal combustion engine are more likely to test drive an internal combustion engine before anyone else. So they will be in the driving seat because they actually understand the workings of it. So therefore, they're going to be the first people to test it out because they're a hot market for it because they're interested in it. So this is what's so important about educating people about what Bitcoin is because as Henry Kissinger said, who controls money controls the world. Now, why would anybody feel as though a statement like that would be so important? Well, that's because there is a group of people, who are actually trying to take over the world and enslave humanity. And the only way we get out of this is by using a monetary system that is outside of the one that they have created for us, which is economically toxic and built on fraud, which gives them an unlimited amount of economic power, which is unbelievably dangerous. If you've got an unlimited amount of economic power in the hands of a nefarious entity. And so those people who initially actually understand what is going on right now need to know the education that I've got, which is what is the difference between money and currency, and how do you create a digital commodity? Because if you understand the significance of this, then you can actually do something about what is happening in the world right now, and hopefully, save our asses.
Beautiful. I love it. All right. So let's see. We got Sirtoshi, Alex, Jack, Brett.
Actually, just quickly while we're here, Gavin, I just want to ask Kurt something. When Kurt had an interview with Ziggy Orcussen, they both agreed with each other that just having one iteration of Bitcoin wasn't. That was one thing they said they disagreed with Craig on. I just wondered, what was that about?
Which one's Ziggy, Sirtoshi?
He's leading the Terranode team.
Oh, okay. Is that something you want to comment on, Kurt? Kurt may be having a coffee right now, so we'll have to come back to him on that.
Ducking out of it.
Yep, we'll come back to him. Yeah, we'll come back to him on that. You know, one of the things, Sirtoshi, you had a show with I think it was a New Zealand investor.
Oh, Kurt.
Kurt. Okay, go ahead, Kurt.
Yeah, I think my microphone was taking a break. So yeah, I can speak for myself. I would probably shouldn't speak for Siggy, but so as far as I'm concerned, it is it's a software thing. So I have always been of the opinion that a mining company should have a proprietary version of its own mining client. And again, this comes from my position that like Bitcoin is not software. Bitcoin is a rule set, and the software is what expresses it. And a commercial entity is likely to have a different desire for what it intends to do with Bitcoin than than somebody that's doing something else with the software, which can be all kinds of things. But and actually, I should be crystal clear. Like Gorilla Pool currently runs a proprietary version. It's based on the reference client. It's not like heavily modified or anything, but I think that is to be expected. Now, the aversion to that actually comes from Satoshi. Many years ago, in discussion, Satoshi was having the conversation about how having multiple clients creates various types of risk. And I think the person asking understood the risk about basically causing an accidental fork of the network. But I don't know what else might have been at play in that conversation. But my opinion on it is simply based on the fact that a commercial entity should take the reference client and modify it to give themselves a competitive edge if that's what they see fit to do, but not change it in some way that causes like contentious change to the network or anything necessarily, but very specifically just a proprietary version for the sake of gaining an edge.
So what was your definition when you said when you were saying there should be more than one iteration? What were you sort of like using as a definition of iteration
of the client? So the node client, for example, and this is actually the case. Like BSV currently has a few iterations of the client on the network, anyways. And in fact, you could probably adapt various versions of like Bitcoin ABC or Bitcoin Unlimited or some of these other customized implementations to function reasonably well on the network anyways. But yeah, just iterations of the client can be made to be in consensus on the network.
Right. I'll have to brush up on my technical understanding to comprehend all that, but thanks very much.
Yeah, no worries.
And Casey, James Locke was trying to request up if he wants to add up and ask questions. Now's a good time, and we can start winding down. If anybody has
I'm going to need to run pretty quick. I got to bail the wife out of being solely in charge of the children.
I mean, we can. Yes, if anybody has any comments, questions, please join up. In the meantime, I'm going to start doing like closing rounds, and we can close down the next 10 minutes. So we go over to you, Ms. Casey Nicole. Closing thoughts.
I'm just having fun with some chat GPT while I'm listening to all of you guys, putting in, my personal questions based on what I'm hearing all of you guys speak about. And it's been given some pretty profound responses. I've been adding to the nest. So just check those out. And thanks again,
what did
everyone.
You ask? What was this about?
I mean, just lots of different things about the 2000 BTC coins that just moved and what the implications of that would be for the entire ecosystem. The lawsuit that President Trump just did.
Somebody moved 2,000 BTC coins?
Yeah, Satoshi
Yes,
Earl coins. I asked Kurt.
What year what were those from? When were they?
they were mined in 2010. She brought it to my attention on this call. I've yet to do a deep dig. It's not
2000 at one time.
Yeah, like 180 million dollars worth of coins moved.
Holy
yeah,
moly.
so
That's
big old coins. Well, and it's funny because all the people commenting are like, "There's nothing to be afraid. There's no reason to think this is Satoshi coming back and crashing the market." So everybody's panicking about the price, but
2000 at once. That seems to be is that the biggest movement we've ever seen?
no, like there's been big movements, but it's certainly a big one, but especially for the age of the coins. But I don't. It's honestly probably nothing.
That's probably
But,
nothing.
Yeah.
Okay, closing thoughts, Reknow.
Great. Yeah, I've got a little poem for everyone just because this is fun. Okay. So in the cryptosphere, debates run wild, with BTC hailed as the favored child. But BSV stands a rebel in name, claiming it's better, unshackled by fame. Your blocks are small, your fees are too high. Your pace is slow as the years go by. We scale, we grow, the future's clear. A blockchain built for what's now and near. BTC scoffs with a hardened grin. The market speaks, we always win. Our network's secure, our name is renowned. Your claims are loud, but you wear no crown. Yet BSV doesn't bow or break. It builds and builds for progress' sake. Apps on chain for all to see. Data, identity, and Web3. We are the layer, the bridge, the key, where money and trust flows seamlessly. A ledger for all, but not just the few. The internet's heart refreshed and new.
All right. No, I'm just
Sirtoshi, mute
Sirtoshi,
yourself.
you're on. Your mic's open. Hot mic. Well, Sirtoshi, why don't we go over to you for closing? Okay, your mic's open. Go ahead and share your closing thoughts. No problem. Yeah, closing thoughts from you, Sirtoshi. We'll come back to you, Reknow, if you have any things. Sirtoshi, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just say a closing thoughts. Just everybody hang in there. And what I would say is strap in and hold on tight, because I suspect there's going to be a fireworks soon, like Craig has predicted, and also I can understand why he said this. Things will not happen slowly. When an avalanche starts, it doesn't kind of like just trundle along slowly. It literally just falls away, and kind of like that's what's going to happen to the price of BTC. And yeah, if you're going to be strapping in, holding BSV, I know times have been tough, but I do kind of like hold myself to blame a little bit for that. But would you have preferred Craig to have used the Tulip Trust back in 2020, and sort of like had the pink finger of blame pointed at him? Or do you think it's better done this way now that, the Terra node is literally going to be going live, and the fruition of what Bitcoin was always meant to be, which is a peer-to-peer electronic cash system for the world, and Web3, is here now? And I'm sure it's been pushed faster this way than it would have done the other way, which just means effectively when it does come on, hopefully we're safe, because we now have a commoditized digital network for the entire world to use, where we can't be censored and all of our data is preserved and safe, and we have sovereignty over it.
Nice. Good inspiration there. Okay, Alex Fauvel, then Kurt, then Brett. So Alex Fauvel, closing thoughts. Alex, come back to you. Okay, Alex.
Yeah, sorry, hang on. I don't really have any closing thoughts other than I remembered what I was going to say earlier, which is, Mela said it himself. You would think that anyone that read the white paper would understand Bitcoin, which means that this case has to be about what is written and how it functions, because you've got a judge there basically talking about how the white paper should describe Bitcoin. it might have just been not a judgment, but a comment in court, but it still matters. Even especially matters given that he was the one presiding over the Sirtoshi case. Sirtoshi is right in that things tend to happen very slowly, then all at once. It's quite a common saying. I don't know what's going to cause it, but I do think that it's likely that crypto as a concept dies at the same time as Bitcoin. And that's predominantly from the strategy of they want, if they are going to fail with this crypto stuff, they want everyone to lump BSV in with that at the same time and dismiss it as a crappy crypto project that, failed a long time before crypto actually failed. So, there might be some gap in between, but I still think the biggest asymmetric bet in history is on the cards. It's just a question of when it actually executes.
Nice. Kurt,
thanks for having me as well.
Yeah, thank you, Alex.
It's been a good space.
Great job, man. I appreciate what you added today. Closing thoughts over to Kurt.
Yeah, I mean, it's Friday. Like, enjoy your weekend. Be good to each other. Go do something that makes you a little uncomfortable. If it makes you grow, I look at Bitcoin to date as a colossal failure. It has made the worst people I can think of rich, powerful, egotistical. It makes them meaner. And I think anybody who has gotten wealthy and it has made them want to be mean to people that are less wealthy than them, those are the people that deserve wealth the least. And ultimately, I've always found Bitcoin to be interesting as both a technology and as a tool for measuring the weight of the culture. And ultimately, the thing that's excited me about Bitcoin since day one is the fact that through incentives, it can maybe make us better people. And so far, I think it has made almost everybody worse that's ever touched it. And it's really unfortunate. It really, really bums me out. And it's for the same reason that it bums me out that Ron Paul didn't win the 2012 presidential nomination for the Republicans, or bums me out that all kinds of things, all kinds of big opportunities to really do something good for the human race in ways that really matter, the eternal stuff. Because here's the thing: in 100 years, all of us are dead. Everyone on this call, we're gone. And what's really going to matter is our legacy. Like, what did we stand for when we were here? Who are the people we helped? Why did we help them? And if we fail, if I fail, but what I did was stand up for what I believe to be right, for what I believe to be the truth about Bitcoin and the truth about a whole bunch of other things. I have a lot of very unpopular opinions that I'm willing to fight for. Maybe forever, maybe till the unthinkable. But I can be proud that my kids or my grandkids be like, you know what, Dad was passionate. Maybe he was crazy. Maybe he was wrong even, but he was always authentic, and he never backed down from something that he believed in. And if that's a value that I can transplant onto you, I don't even really care what you believe. But if I can encourage you to be authentic and stand up for what you believe in, I think the world will become a better place anyways. Whether or not Bitcoin actually works or whether it changes anything, I hope that the consolation prize can be just a little bit more bravery to be the authentic you. And that's the thought that I'm going to leave you with to take into the weekend. So go, hug your parents, hug your children, hug your spouse, go do something good in the world. And just be good to each other. Have a good weekend.
Thank you for joining us, Kurt. Well said. Let's go over to BSV Columbia. Closing thoughts.
Thank you, Gavin. Yes, I have a few closing thoughts for today. The first one is there are a lot of people out there that doesn't know anything about Bitcoin, anything about cryptos. I think there are more more people that doesn't know anything about this industry, that the people are in there right now using crypto coins or core coin. We can estimate, I don't know, maybe 100 million user, but there are not really Bitcoin users. There are exchange users, and very few, as the people are today joining this meeting, are less than 1% of those people. So the world needs our help to be educated about what is the really Bitcoin and what can do that for ourselves. So BTC people are like it's not worse blind person that the one who don't want to see. That are the BTC people that even if they have read one time the white paper, doesn't understand anything about that. So again, there are more people out there that needs our help, and sometimes could be frustrating talking with core BTC core people. So don't lose your time. Invert your time better teaching and educate people that really needs the original BIC. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. Very well said. All right, closing thoughts over to you, Brett Banafe, and we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, maybe one thing I'd like to do is just add something to what Kurt said there when looking back and considering the legacy of each individual on this call. You know, principled, you know, maybe they were wrong, maybe they were, you know, but they were authentic. They were, you know, adamant about what they believed in service of others, you know, but I would maybe add one thing to that and say, you know, willing to change their mind. I think the degree to which we can be willing to change our mind when presented with new evidence really is a hallmark of our ability to do good and be of service to each other, because it's when we become transfixed by an idea and we refuse to accept alternative approaches or anything like this, that really what ends up happening is we become, you know, like a servant of that idea, and it's when we like drop our guard and become just this servant of this idea that really we become manipulatable, and then what we try to do is we go out there and try to manipulate others. You know, I think a really great example of this is the narrative within BTC. We've explained a lot of the reasons why, but you know, there's that meme. If we can all, you know, imagine in our minds that meme where the person consistently asks the person to repeat what they're saying. You know, like, so okay, I want small blocks. Okay, but what do you really mean? You know, okay, well, I want wide distribution of the UTXO set. Okay, but say what you actually mean. I don't believe that Bitcoin actually is valuable or that it will work. Okay, thank you. At least you're being honest about what you actually mean. You don't believe in Bitcoin, and that's okay. You know, not everyone is going to see the value that a new and emergent technology is going to come, in the same reason why, you know, the classic example of Noah building the ark, right? That not everyone is going to actually put the time and effort and energy in to build that ark. You know, but at the end of the day, you know, there's no stopping a moment whose time has come. And what we've seen with Bitcoin is that moment, we're on the precipice of that moment. And, you know, we use these spaces as ways to remind each other of that and say, hey, this is worth fighting for. It is worth living up to these values. And it also is, to go back to the original idea, worth you know, not holding on to those ideas with an iron grip. Be willing to change your mind as new ideas come along, because at the end of the day, it's not important that the idea itself survive. What's important is the value that it represents to humanity, that we become a more authentic, transparent, principled group of people who hold each other to more account. And I think that Bitcoin is just the zeitgeist of the moment to be able to allow humanity to more deeply fulfill its own obligation to itself. And thank you so much for having us on, Gavin.
You're welcome, Brett. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. It's been a great one. Be sure to retweet the space, like the space, and follow your host. And we'll do it again here, potentially even next Friday if we've got a valid topic to bring up. So, all right. And subscribe on YouTube as well. I'll see everyone. I'll see you at the top. Later, guys. Thank you, Miss Casey Nicole.